You came back, and that makes me really happy. That's absolutely awesome. Absolutely awesome. We've got episode 2 of Terrible Question with Ginger Hendrix, coming to you from an uncomfortable chair in my own backyard. In my own kind of coming out story, which I'm about 5 years into right now, my process was very, it was very much an extension of my faith, of my personal, of my faith, of my spiritual life. I didn't, for me, I didn't pick up the Bible and huck it out my car window while I was driving 90 on a fast road. I went and sat at a hilltop, this little kind of place where there's all this ice plant, and I sat in the middle of the ice plant, and I looked out over the ocean, and I just listened, because I had run out of language at the time. I was pretty wiped out emotionally, and I just listened. And the things that I did say were things like, if who I think I might be is really not the plan, then I'm going to need you to tell me. And I sat, I would say, listening and devastated, because I was ready. I was really ready to hear kind of like too fucked up to progress. I was ready to hear that. When I left the evangelical church community, I didn't leave my faith. I didn't. It was sort of just like, it's kind of like maybe I'm an expat, just trying to kind of pick apart what my coming out required me to leave behind, and what it allowed me to hold on to more tightly than ever. And that really brings us to today's question, because one of the primary things facing me is, what do I do about these? These are all my Bibles. This is the first Bible I ever got as, it's kind of my first real Bible. It was when I was 12 years old, and my parents gave it to me for Christmas. And I didn't use it for a really long time because my dog chewed the edges, but now I think it's my favorite. And it says Ginger Lynn Adcock on the front, which this is the sign of the church kid, right? Are you gold lettered or not? Are you gold lettered? I'm gold lettered. Tabs from Bible study. That's funny. A lot of underlining. I will pour out my spirit on all people. Underlined 3 times. And it's signed by my mom and dad. It's pretty cute. Then I got these 3 Amplified Bibles, which are still my very, very favorite. It's like, well, before that, when I was in college and I studied French, I had a French Bible. I had a Phillips, which I think I must have been pregnant. I'm going to need a bigger Bible. And I literally went out and bought this honker black Bible, because I felt like, oh, I'm going to need a bigger Bible for this. I got this one later. And I still feel in a relationship with them. But one of the questions is, what's that relationship look like now? A lot of people who want to be protective of the inerrancy of the Bible will ask the question, is it biblical? Which I think is interesting, because biblical means, I think the rough translation of that is it in there? It just is. It's like a preposition. It's like in the Bible. In, out. This peanut butter is pantrical. These dirty dishes are sinkical. This gum is now my mouthical. This bread wrapper thingy is now toastical. Uh-oh. Uh-oh, it's toastical. This treat is now doggical. Oh, good job. Good job. Sorry, there's no more. Sorry, dude, you're late. I'm making this iron tubical. Oh, it's tubical now. Maybe I'll plug it in, because if it's in there, it must be. Should I plug it? Should I? Don't do that. That's a bad idea. Even if it is tubical, you shouldn't plug it in. See what I'm saying here? The moral of the story about David and Bathsheba was always fascinating, because anytime they talked about David, it was about a man. The man after God's own heart is what they called him. And then it was very much the moral of that story, the takeaway of that story was, look, God chooses broken people. When the moral could have been, if you want a new girlfriend and she's already married, just take her husband and put him at the front of the war. So, like, why wasn't that the moral? Why wasn't the header how to get a girlfriend who's married? I really got the story of the woman caught in adultery on my mind. The moral of that story was always, don't do adultery, or people might throw rocks at you. There is so much more to that story, though. You know, the setting of that story is, I always imagined it to be kind of like a dirt courtyard sort of a deal, with all kinds of men standing up, and then a woman alone in the dirt there, maybe covered with a sheet, maybe totally stark naked, although they never would have said that to us. There surely wasn't a flannelgraph of that. Where does the naked lady go? That's going to be the woman in adultery. Okay. You sure it's not Ananias and Sapphira? No, that's the flannelgraph of the dead lady who didn't give all her money. So let's say she has a sheet on. She's alone. She's in this courtyard, and there's all these men lined up. And Jesus and they got handfuls of rocks, because apparently what we know, or what we're told when the story begins, is that she's been caught in adultery. Although, time out. That's the name of the header for the story. So it blows your mind when you think, like, I believe in biblical inerrancy, maybe, but who were these guys that were picking what the headers were? Here's what this story is about. The woman caught in adultery. That story could have been called A Guy Named Harold, who Jesus noticed standing about to throw a rock at his girlfriend. That's not what it's called. Literally, the story of the woman who takes the perfume and dumps it on Jesus's head, which I read as like a kind of her going, Bitcoin, I'm in. She takes her most precious thing and she just kind of sees him and goes, you're the real deal, and dumps it. The header on that one says, Jesus anointed by sinful woman. I opened another one, and there's another story called The Rich Young Ruler. Now, this is a story about a guy who goes to Jesus and says, how do I get to heaven? And he says, you got to sell everything. And that guy goes, later. And that one's, for whatever reason, not called The Greedy Young Asshole. It's called The Rich Young Ruler. But the woman who goes up to Jesus and she pours her whole heart out, that one is called Jesus anointed by a sinful woman. And this just begs the question, what the actual about the headers? Good morning, my flock.
Coming to you today from the headquarters of the Holy Jesus Center for Biblical Organization and Paragraphing. As your director, Dr. Earl P. Dowd, PhD in the header, class of none of your holy business. A number of questionable files having to do with the proper placement and understanding of various biblical texts have been brought to our attention, and we have done everything we can to separate the sheep from the lady sheep, also the goats. And as a final note on the question of the story of the young woman who found herself in a precarious position with a young man who is already betrothed. Finalist suggestions are the man who stood with no pants while considering throwing rocks at his girlfriend. I believe that the imagery there is too much for most to handle. Number 2 was additional ways to make use of unused baseball fields. And number 3, maximum assurance of superiority. I'm not sure who put that one there, but all ideas are welcome here at the HJC PCCF PO. That's all for today, my flock. I'm glad that you were able to tune in to our closed circuit religious television channel for this brief intermission of our usual showing of David and Goliath find the Dead Sea Scrolls, but Goliath chews them up, and so somebody has to rewrite them, and thank you very much. I think it should be us.
You are gracious and kind to join me with these questions and reflections. This has been episode 2 of Terrible Question with Ginger Hendrix, coming to you from an uncomfortable chair, and I gotta tell you, it's the truth, in my own backyard. Cool. Later.
Dr. Earl loves you. He does.